Okay, so we're on to the final video of your notes today. We just finished talking about phylums, and so then we take all of our phylums and we sort them into classes. So to divide animals up further into their different classes, we focus on the body covering, the reproductive system, and the temperature regulation approach for that particular type of animal. So some common classes that you guys will be familiar with, well, some will be familiar with, some are probably new. One is mammalia. So for mammalia, the body covering is that we have hair. The reproductive system is that you give birth to live young and you nurse those young. And temperature regulation is that mammals are an endothermic animal, which means they create their own heat through metabolism or the chemical processes in their body. Next up, another example is aves, which you guys know as the birds. Birds' body covering is feathers. The reproductive system is that they lay eggs with a hard shell, and their temperature regulation is also endothermic. Birds make their own heat through metabolism. Another example for you is reptilia. Reptilia, their body covering is scales. Their reproductive system is that they lay eggs but with soft shells, and their temperature regulation is that they are ectothermic. So they take on the heat in the environment around them. The last example that I have for you on the slide here is a new one, and it's pronounced osteichthyes, and it's the bony fish. So bony fish, their body covering is scales. The reproductive system is that they lay eggs, but they have external fertilization. So they lay eggs on the bottom of the lake or the river where they live, and then male fish come and spawn, and that's how the eggs get fertilized. So their reproductive system is eggs plus external fertilization. And then their temperature regulation is that they are also ectothermic. Now, just like the other ones, there are many, many, many more classes, but these are just for examples. Another class that you're probably familiar with is amphibia. So the body covering for amphibia would be permeable skin, is how we would explain that one. Their reproductive system is that they lay eggs with external fertilization, and their temperature regulation is that they are ectothermic. They take on the temperature of their environment. So depending on these three features, body covering, reproductive system, and temperature regulation, we can sort all of our chordates into their different classes. I lost my controls here. There they are. Okay, so then we get to sort of the hard area to talk about in the classification system, and that's order and family. The reason why order and family are difficult to talk about is that there isn't a list of like 2 or 3 things that we always look for order and family. It varies based on the class that you're in. So because mammals and birds have such drastically different anatomy and bodies, we look for different things to break them into their orders and families. But you can know that the orders and families break the classes into smaller groups based on common characteristics. It's just the characteristics are specific to the class that you were in the first place. Now, the other thing that's kind of tricky and sometimes confusing about order and family is that they often sound like the next level down, the genus. And that's actually by design. All of the families are named for their genus. All they do is they add a suffix to the end of the word. So all families will end with either adae or aca. And adae is for animals, aca is for plants, and it's just added to the genus name. So for example, if we were talking about cats, the genus of cats is feline. And so if we talk about the family of cats, they are the Felidae. So we just add that adae to make the family title. So when you guys are researching animals, if you come across them and you're like, the family and the genus sound the same, that's by design. The family should have the adae and the genus is without the adae. Okay, so finally we're getting to more specific groupings that are significant and tell us a lot about interrelatedness of animals on a small scale. So a genus refers to a group of closely related species. So there are 3 criteria to qualify as a group of closely related species or a genus, and that's that the descendants are grouped together, it's a compact group, and there are distinct features within that group. So this is where we talk about things like all of the cat-like species or all of the dog-like species. Those sorts of groupings are what we're looking at when we're talking about the genus level. So they're animals that are definitely distinct from other groups, but they seem to be related to each other. All right, and then finally we get to the very bottom rank, which is the species. It's the most basic unit of a taxonomic rank, and this is where we refer to the largest natural population of interbreeding animals. So the big thing with this one is that it's a division between one group of animals and another based on their ability to breed and to produce fertile offspring. The challenge is that what a species is in theory and what a species is in practice is a little bit gray sometimes. In order to get into that, I want to talk to you a little bit about the lion and the tiger. So we define a species as two natural populations that can interbreed and produce fertile offspring. So lions and tigers are two different species. Now, the way that we know that is not only their genetics, but we can also interbreed a lion and a tiger, and you can produce an offspring that's called a liger, because it's a lion and a tiger put together. But the problem is, no matter what you do, if you take a liger and breed it with a liger, or even take a liger and breed it with a tiger or a lion, it will not be able to produce fertile offspring. So when you breed a lion and a tiger, you can get a cub that is able to live its life. It has functional organs. It doesn't have any major problems with its everyday functioning, but its DNA is not able to code properly when it goes into the next generation. So basically, though the animal is fine, its reproduction is broken at the DNA level. And so, though you can make a liger, you can make a fertile offspring. Lions and tigers are definitely two different species because they can't interbreed. So that's sort of the example in practice. That's great. The problem is then you run into animals like the gray wolf and the dog. Gray wolves and dogs can produce fertile offspring, but they are definitely two separate species because one is domestic and one is wild. And so some of these definitions get a little bit gray when you actually get out into the real world. But for practical purposes, a species is basically one type of animal. So it's the difference between a red fox, a brown fox, and the foxes that live in Africa. It's a way to separate off this breeding group of animals compared to this breeding group of animals. Okay, so far we've talked about the classification portion of taxonomy. So that is one portion of being a taxonomist or the science of taxonomy. The other side of the science of taxonomy is producing names for all of these animals or plants or organisms that we're studying and putting into this classification system. So the naming structure of the taxonomic system is a binomial nomenclature, which just means that we take two words to name things. So binomial means two words. Nomenclature means name things. You will want to remember binomial nomenclature for future tests. So basically the system that we use in the Linnaean classification system to name animals is that we take their genus and their species, and that basically becomes the animal's first and last name. So the genus is their first name and the species is their last name. So the genus is always going to be, oh, and also because we want to make sure that these are clear that this is the official name, it's a scientific name, it's not just the name that we use in English for this animal. We format it differently so that when you are writing a scientific paper, these names stick out and everybody can reference them as the formal name, and that way we know we're talking about the same animal. So the genus is always identified as the first letter or the first word, and the first letter is always going to be capitalized. The species is always the second word, and the first letter of the second word is always lowercase. So it's essentially, for the rest of your life, you capitalize your first name, but you never capitalize your last name. Also, just to make sure that it's very clear that this is a scientific name, whenever you type this scientific name, it should be in italics, so it should be sideways, because then it really makes it obvious that not only is the genus and species capitalized in lowercase, but it's in italics. This is a scientific name according to the taxonomic science. So taxonomy is the science of classifying and naming, and now you know how to classify and name. So I want to look at an example with you. So for example, here is the classification of the gray wolf. So we start out in the kingdom Animalia, and this organism is going to be in the animal kingdom because they have animal cells. They can move around their environment and they eat food. Next, they're in the phylum Chordata because this is an animal with an internal skeleton and a vertebra. Next, it's in the class Mammalia because this is an animal that suckles its young. It is hairy and it is endothermic. It controls its own body temperature with its metabolism. Next, it's in the order Carnivora. So in the class Mammalia, we sort into orders based on teeth. And so the gray wolf has carnivorous teeth, so it's in Carnivora. Then finally, it's in the family Canidae, which is the dog family. And then it's in the genus Canis. So you can see there the genus is Canis, family is Canis, but with idae. So Canidae, Canis. And then finally, the species for the gray wolf is lupus. So the scientific name of the gray wolf is Canis lupus. Now, the scientific name of the domestic dog is Canis familiaris because they live with the family. So Canis lupus is the wild wolf, Canis familiaris is the domestic dog. So this ends the wrap up of the taxonomy notes. I am actually going to forward ahead. I have one kind of extra activity in case you have finished early for the day, and that is a game for you guys to play. So I'm going to click real quick through our references slide and then introduce the game. Okay, so if you guys finished early, if you do a quick Google search for Journey 2050, so like you're going on a journey to 2050. This is a game that I learned about while I was at training in Texas, and it is really cool, and we're going to be using it second semester. And I figured if you had a little extra time today, you guys might want to play around with the game just a little bit. So if you have time, maybe 10 to 15 minutes left in class, go ahead and go to Journey 2050. When you follow a link to that website, if you scroll down a little bit, there's a big blue icon on the right side of the screen that says go to the game, so click that. If it prompts you for your name and school, just skip the teacher code box. You don't actually need it. Enter your name and school, and then it should open up the demo, and you have a few minutes where you guys can play the demo. We will be coming back to this game later in second semester. We're going to be doing some stuff with it as we go, but I figured you guys, if you had a little extra time, might enjoy a minute to play a game. So I hope you guys had a lovely day, and I hope to be with you on Wednesday. If not, we'll probably have some more YouTube videos. So thank you guys for your patience with this setup, and yeah, we'll see you on Wednesday.